Welcome, everyone, to the Rethink It podcast, a podcast designed for equipping families and individuals struggling with brain health issues to identify practical, natural health science and lifestyle approaches to restore optimal brain health and prevent dementia. My podcast, my newsletter, my website, and my integrative practice all focus on providing down-to-earth solutions for upgrading and protecting brain health. This podcast is meant to supply women with brain fog and chronic health issues with the knowledge to choose affordable, effective tools and techniques that go beyond brain hacking. The goal is to preserve your quality of life, your health, your freedom, and your independence. I'm excited you're here today. I'm Sandy, your host for the next 30 minutes to an hour. Okay, guys, welcome back to the podcast on YouTube video. I just want you guys to know that this is an emerging process for me. And there definitely have been bumps along the way. Last week, you guys, trying to be early and on time so that I have these out to you guys in a regular, consistent manner. I had a wonderful interview recorded I was so excited about it, with a gentleman from the Science of Light Foundation. It's a nonprofit foundation, and we had this great interview. It was so good, about light. And you guys know how much I love light. I talk about it all the time. I've given you guys challenges on, getting light exposure at certain times of the day and things like that. But he really digs into it, and it was such a great episode. And then I went to review the podcast for you guys, and here it was, like, it didn't take his stuff. So basically I was hardwired, he was not, and his Wi-Fi went out, and so I lost like 30 minutes of his conversation. So here I am recording the podcast I had actually intended to do before his anyway, which is about fluoride. So we did hear from our wonderful previous guest, Dawn Ewing, who is the executive director of the International Academy of Biological Dentistry and Medicine. And she talked a little bit, she just touched on fluoride a little in that episode. That wasn't a fluoride episode, it was a biological dentistry episode where I wanted you to guys connect the mouth to the body. So I hope that was helpful, and it is available both on YouTube and on our podcaster. So go back and find it. It was an amazing episode. I actually learned a good bit during those interviews, and I was very thankful for her time. So in follow-up to that episode, though we had some different changes of subjects in between, I wanted to touch on fluoride, because fluoride is definitely something that some people still think is good for you. And it's maybe half of the population, I think it's actually less, know that this is actually not something that's awesome for the body. It doesn't even hit the radar of potentially being a root cause of things. So in practice, it's common for me to hear from my clients that they are really overwhelmed by contradictory information, which I'm sure this is the case for you guys. And they just want to give up. Maybe that's how you feel. I get it. I was there. I really do understand that feeling. And that's why I do this podcast. So I want to help you guys decipher the headlines and the health narratives regarding this particular subject of fluoride, especially. Now, I'm doing it in every podcast, but for sure in this podcast surrounding fluoride, I want you guys to get the information and really be able to think through it. I want you to be able to decipher the headlines and the health narratives that currently exist in a way that's easy to understand. You really shouldn't have to get a PhD in nutrition, a medical doctorate, or a PhD in biology to be able, or chemistry for that matter, because fluoride's a chemical, right? To be able to interpret health science and advocate for yourself. You shouldn't have to have a degree to be able to do. You should be able to logically think through this. And that's my hope for you guys, okay? So it took me about 20 years in medicine and medical practice, okay? Remember, I was the PA, went back to anesthesia school. I practice in anesthesia still. So 20 years, it's actually been longer than that now, if you count my training. It's been a long time. So it took me 20 years to realize that this common sense approach to thinking about the body and health and healing is actually more valuable then understanding the mechanisms of like 200 different prescription medications, which I think that's what we had to learn or more. I don't know. It felt like a million. But anyhow, on one topic that's often fraught with like controversy and and definitely mainstream debate is over fluoride and health, human health, dental health. So on a personal note, I just want you guys to know that that's where my journey in challenging kind of the mainstream narrative about health, it began with fluoride. It was during my quest of trying to identify and eliminate any of the common chemicals that were like contributing to my children's ADHD, because I had one with ADHD that was really profound and one that was looking like he was going in the same direction. So I was eager to not follow in line with the first child who was medicated at age 4. I wanted to do it more naturally. By this time, this third child came around and he was demonstrating similar symptoms. So in that research place where I kind of found, the diet changes and modifications and things like that to do for him, I also stumbled onto research about fluoride and its effect on brain health. And it was shocking to me how much research existed about the negative effects, negative health effects, and yet there was still no public conversation occurring around it at all. I remember sharing the information with a few of my very well-educated colleagues who would not hear it. They would almost puppet the marketing. I call it a marketing jingle because that's what it sounds like. Anytime you know what to say and everybody's saying the same thing, it's a jingle. Okay, so this is a marketing jingle of the American Dental Association is fluoride prevents cavities, right? So they would just respond with that. And I was like, but what about the other stuff? And it was the first time I realized that some of the most educated people I know do not make a habit of critically thinking about things that they were taught. And it really was a turning point in my career. So to illustrate just how much contradictory information is out there, I just did a really quick Google search for you guys just to see what came up on the top, okay? And I did it related to water fluoridation. Now, I'm going to talk about fluoride in several ways because water fluoridation is the thing that everybody thinks about, but fluoride is actually in a lot of things, and we'll talk about that at the end. But the first article that came up was published by the New York Times in 2021, and it was titled, "Anchorage Mayor Briefly Shuts Off Fluoride in City's Water System." Okay, I will put that up here on the screen for you guys to see, and I also link that below so you can read that article if you want to. I definitely want you to be able to read the whole thing because I'm just going to highlight a few points, okay? And so the article, for those who aren't going to take the time to read it, it talks about an Anchorage mayor, Dave Bronson, who personally shut off the fluoridation process at the water treatment plant, supposedly over safety and exposure concerns for the workers handling the fluoride at the plant. Okay, so that's already should tell you something. Fluoride poses a hazard, an occupational hazard. And there's that. Okay, there's already something to be putting in your little noggin there. So the fluoridation system was essentially halted for about 5 hours. So other city leaders speculated that Bronson's motives were different. There was a quote from the article that goes like this: "Some local officials question whether Mr. Bronson, a Republican, might have been motivated by false claims that safety of drinking fluoridated water, which have circulated for decades and have gained some traction in Alaska." The article goes on to explain that poor fluoridation in the state of Alaska has led to increases in cavity, and that water fluoridation is considered by the CDC one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. Demonstrating the political nature of this issue, the article quotes a leading Democrat. And you guys, I'm not trying to be like Democrat, Republican, but I just want you to see that there is a political play here. So it quotes a leading Democrat. The Democrat is Mr. Constant, and he's leading an investigation on Bronson's motives for halting the fluoridation. And he says the following, and it's a quote, you guys. I'm not certain of the facts, but if proven true, this fits squarely into the Venn diagram of anti-science arguments so commonly these days: COVID denial, anti-vaccine rhetoric, and anti-fluoride politics. Do you like my little Venn diagram here? So the article points out that Mayor Bronson is a former Air Force pilot who took office in July and was opposed to the mask and vaccine mandates in order to combat the coronavirus. And it said that in July, he did not plan to get the vaccine, which he called experimental. Okay, so here we're in an article talking about fluoride, and suddenly we're having a conversation about whether this guy is pro or against masks and the COVID vaccine. So my takeaway point is that if you oppose fluoridation, clearly, according to the New York Times, then you're among the extreme anti-science community. And I think that's an interesting position to promote, given the next article that I am about to cover for you. This article is from the Harvard Review. Okay, now I just want to point out that whether the article is from a leading scientific journal or the New York Times, it's just really important to think critically about it and about the content contained therein, and ask yourself, does it pass the sniff test? And, you know, sometimes leading journals will publish things that are not accurate either. So, but the point here is we've got the New York Times, and then we've got the Harvard Review. Okay, and the Harvard Review article is called "The Impact of Fluoride on Neurological Development in Children." As opposed to the New York Times piece, it reviewed a wide amount of scientifically validated data to objectively and not politically examine the concerns about negative brain health effects from water fluoridation. So the article begins with a statement, and here's the quote. It says, "For years, health experts have been unable to agree on whether fluoride in drinking water may be toxic to the developing human brain. Extremely high levels of fluoride are known to cause neurotoxicity in adults, and negative effects on memory and learning have been reported in rodent studies. But little is known about the substance's impact on children's neurodevelopment," which I would honestly, I'm going to pause for a second and say, bullcrap. Okay, that's not true. There is a lot of data actually, and it goes all the way back into the 1980s, but we'll just go with it. Okay, this is what the Harvard Review says. It goes on to review the information collected from a large population meta-analysis from China. The data suggests that the IQ was highly affected by fluoridation, resulting in a 7-point drop in IQ, which, by the way, is half of a standard deviation. That's huge. That's a very big drop. So the article concludes with these statements. Fluoride seems to fit in with lead, mercury, and other poisons that cause chemical brain drain. The effect of each toxicant may seem small, but the combined damage on a population scale can be serious, especially because the brain power of the next generation is crucial to all of us. So fluoride use in dentistry has a questionable history. Okay, so that was our article. What do you think about that? So here we have fluoride, and it's clearly got an effect on the brain, but we've been told for over a century that it is important for dental health and protecting us against cavities. Clearly, that's what the New York Times article was proposing, and saying that because of their areas in Alaska that weren't fluoridating, now they have higher cavity rates. We're going to look at that in a second here. In a lot more detail, but just so you know, that there is a questionable history around fluoride, and I'm not going to really dig into the long history of it. I'm sure there's other YouTubers have done that, other podcasts that will tell you that, but it's a definite questionable history, to say the least, and one that implicates the health industry, and one of many science for sale kind of cover-ups. Okay, let's just leave it at that. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise that a toxic halogen like fluoride would be approved as a health remedy in a time when mercurochrome, which is mercury, it's medicinal mercury, was given internally for a variety of health issues. Just an aside here, because I'm a weirdo, I was reading about what is that? The Matahari. Matahari. Okay. Matahari was a famous, like, risque stripper from I would say she was a stripper. One of the first in France, I think, in the early 1900s. And it went through her story. This isn't about Matahari, but what caught my attention, and of course, because I'm always listening for health issues and science and da da da, was that she lost a child. And they suspect it was because of the treatment that she was receiving, which was mercury. I thought that was crazy. So anyway, sorry, an aside, going back on track here. So shouldn't be surprised that when fluoride was approved, for use for medicinal purposes, for dental health in the US, it was during a time that we used mercury as well to cure many things. Like, that's shouldn't be surprising to you given the time. Remember everything in context. This is the time it was approved. It was approved during the time when we were using mercury, when tobacco was being endorsed by ads by your local doctors with his favorite brand of cigarettes in his pocket, literally. It's the same tired story that applies to today to most corporate medicine. Just follow the money trail and you'll see where the recommendations come from. Sorry to say it. But we aren't here really to talk about the history of fluoride, though I would say the story is pretty capturing, and it is about as capturing as any true crime story. And I would recommend a few books written by far more qualified people to talk on that subject. People like the investigative journalist Christopher Bryson, who wrote The Fluoride Deception, detailing the history, the science, and all the dates in between. And you'll see a picture of that book here. And I'll link to it in the show notes as well for those of you who aren't watching me on YouTube. So today, I just want to raise your awareness on the negative impacts of fluoride on human health. That's all we're going to do today. We'll have a part 2 because there's so much information here, where we really kind of talk about what you can do to prevent and heal and, reduce your fluoride exposure and accumulation, okay? But today, I just want to make you aware, of the health impacts. Particularly because this is a brain health podcast, the health impacts on the brain. I want to give you some resources to help you identify if your water is indeed fluoridated, and you'll have those links in the show notes as well. And if so, how to reduce or limit or completely eliminate the fluoride that you're being exposed to. Okay. I don't want you to become overwhelmed. Y'all just breathe a second. There's a little bit of chemistry here, but it's not going to be too much. I just want you to know what's going on. And I just want you to be empowered. I want you to be empowered not just to protect yourself from the impacts, but also protect any of your children and your family. Protect your brain. I mean, this is a big deal for the brain, and I'll give you the reasons why here shortly. So there was a very large review published by the National Research Council, and I will give you that link as well. It's a free PDF. It was by part of the National Academies of Science and published in 2006. And it's a very long document, and they go into all the review of the science, all the review of the literature, and then they give their recommendations. Like, we see that this is something that we're seeing, like cancer. Well, we recommend that we need to do more studies on blah, blah, blah. That's the goal of this article by the National Academies of Science, was to kind of see what the literature currently said and what needed to be further researched when it came to fluoride. Now, this came out after an article, I think that was in 2002. Now I have to look that one back up. That's just in the back of my head, because I remember being shocked by it. But it was a large, like, retrospective study that showed a clear link to ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, and something else, neurobehaviorally, in children exposed to levels of fluoride that are common in water. So that was kind of a shocking one. But this is a different study. This looks at everything. So I want just to highlight for you what they found. So in heavily fluoridated areas, and these are qualified by exposure levels, so the standard level in the water is 4 milligrams per liter, and in serum levels in some cases. So they found higher levels in heavily fluoridated areas of dental fluorosis and skeletal fluorosis. Now, what is that? It's essentially where the bones of the skeleton get weaker and stiffer. And it leads to, within skeletal fluorosis, it leads to pain, it leads to cancer, it leads to joint discomfort or arthritis. In the teeth, it actually leads to brittle pocket-like spots in the teeth, where what you'll see in the teeth is this white flecks. And maybe I'll find a picture and post it here for you guys on the YouTube channel. White specks all over the teeth. Okay, what that is that like divots in the teeth that where calcium kind of tries to fill in, and it gets this white irregularity. But in the nature of the bone, it's actually like little divots, and it actually increases the risk of food particles and stuff getting stuck in the enamel. It weakens the enamel. It's not good for the enamel. So here's one argument against, internal use of fluoride for cavity prevention. Dental fluorosis is a well-known thing, well-known in the literature when it comes to how much, taking fluoride internally and what it leads to. You almost see no dental fluorosis when the exposure level is less than 2 milligrams per liter, but standard water fluoridation is about 4 milligrams per liter. So that's huge, right? So the other things they found was osteoporosis and arthritis may be linked with that skeletal fluorosis. They went into detail, vertebral bone fractures and osteoporosis. Here people are taking bisphosphonates or whatever your current osteoporosis medication is to try to fix something that may be being caused by your exposure to fluoride. Okay, disruption of reproductive hormones. So that was interesting. Again, I mentioned in the podcast a while back that this great movie but had Mark Ruffalo in it called Dark Waters. I highly recommend it. It's a little bit deep, but it goes over the long, I think it was 30 year lawsuit against DuPont because of their discovery in the PFOAs, which you guys now know maybe as forever chemicals. Those forever chemicals contain fluoride. That's why one of the reasons they're so bad, and they never leave your body. So one thing they just found was they caused major reproductive disruption, right? So it's an endocrine disruptor. And certainly in reproductive hormones, there was a higher link with women who were exposed to fluoride levels giving birth, clear link, giving birth to Down syndrome children. It also interferes with just reproduction in general, whether or not you can have children. So that's a huge thing. Of course, in this podcast, it's important to point out the brain health issue. I already kind of touched on it a little bit, but fluoride definitely, that was a big, it was huge for me to say this in print. Fluoride interferes with brain function both directly and indirectly, according to the studies. Both ways, directly and indirectly, meaning it literally affects the actual neurons in the brain, and it actually, or indirectly, it may affect the endocrine system, which then affects the nervous system, right? So directly and indirectly. So population is exposed, this is from the article, literally, population exposed to different concentrations of fluoride in drinking water should include measurements of reasoning, ability, problem solving, IQ, short and long-term memory, because of the risk that they saw. And the changes in IQ, the ability to concentrate, the problem solving ability, and their short and long-term memory was affected in these studies. So, and also they clearly made a link between fluoride, cumulative fluoride, and dementia. So there's that. The endocrine system is affected without question. So the endocrine organs are most clearly impacted, or at least the organs that are most clearly impacted or researched, at least in this study. And there's many more. There's so much research on this topic, you guys. So I'm trying to keep it simple. But the ones that are the most clearly impacted, most clearly demonstrated in this study were the thyroid, the parathyroid, and the pineal gland. When these organs are disrupted, nearly every other organ is disrupted. Anybody with low thyroid can attest to that, right? Everything's affected. You got brain health issues, you're gaining weight, your reproduction doesn't work right, your gut doesn't work right. Nothing works right if your thyroid doesn't work right. So at this point, I just want to show you, and I'm going to actually try to do this myself instead of having my smart little guys over there editing my podcast do it for you. But I'm going to show you the periodic table and let you logically think through this so you guys can learn how to do it without having a PhD, right? Don't freak out, my non-science minded people. Okay, I'm just appealing to your logic. This isn't going to be a science lecture, but for you guys, you podcasters, I'm going to link a picture of the periodic table, or you can maybe try to pop over to this YouTube and check it out. But I will put it in the show notes. I've got a bunch of stuff I'm putting in the show notes for you guys. For you YouTubers out here, let's take a look at this 8th grade nightmare together, this periodic table. Let's see if I can share my screen and find it for you guys. And I wish this was bigger. I don't know if I can make it bigger, but I'll just read it to you from here. You've got this column is the column I want you to look at. This one right here. It's a very important column. This is the halogens column. Okay, and in this column, what you see that happens is the top of the column are your most reactive chemicals, and as you go down, they become less reactive. Okay, so what that means is when it comes to binding with another chemical, or say even a cell receptor, you're going to have more readily binding elements at the very top of this column. So what I'm looking at here for you podcasters is the halogen column, and it has, and I'm going to read it to you guys, it's fluoride at the top, chlorine at the right underneath fluoride, bromine right underneath chlorine, and iodine right under bromine. Okay, so that's important. Why? Because I just said fluoride is the most the one at the top is the most reactive. So what if you are consuming fluoride in your water every day, and you might be, say, deficient in iodine? Okay, for those of you who don't know, iodine is incredibly important for thyroid hormone production. It's triiodo something for your T3, right? So, and tetraiodo something for T4. So iodo meaning iodine, okay? So iodine is necessary for good thyroid hormone function. If, say, you've got a lot of fluoride and you don't have a lot of iodine because you're not eating well, and just so you know, studies show that we have very poor iodine consumption in the US. I came out of school thinking it was just in certain cultures other countries, not the US, where we had, iodine deficiency. But it turns out that's not true, at least not anymore. Iodine deficiency is actually found. It's definitely found in the US, and it's a global issue. Maybe it's gut health, who knows? But what we know is that iodine is deficient. And here we go putting fluoride in our water. So if we do have some iodine, what do you think is going to bind first? Iodine or fluoride? Fluoride, of course, because it's at the top. But what I want to point out too is down here, and this is just for your own sake, and it's not about the fluoride at this moment. I'm just taking it aside for a second. But yeah, fluoride and chlorine. Chlorine is obviously used in water. Even your salt water converts to chlorine and makes chlorine. So, chlorine is an exposure that you get as well. In your tap water, they chlorinate the water as well. So they don't just fluoridate it, they chlorinate it. Why? Because chlorine kills bacteria. So we've got fluoride, chlorine in our water, so we have no chance with this iodine. How many of you guys know somebody with low thyroid? Do you have low thyroid? Could it possibly be an exposure? It very well could be. But let's go one more down. We got bromine. Okay. And this is just, I know it's not a part of a fluoride conversation, but bromine is a halogen. And you want to know where you find bromine? You find it in your bread. You find it in your white flour. So every flour on the shelf in the grocery store, except for a few brands that have become smart about this and know this is an issue, brominate their flour. So now you've got 3 halogens that you are commonly being exposed to that are competing with iodine. So do you think it affects your endocrine system? Heck yeah. So that's the story with endocrine disruption and fluoride. So I hope that kind of helps you guys understand that a little bit better. And I hope it wasn't too much of a detour into the chemistry world. But yeah, so needless to say, thyroid and parathyroid and pineal gland are definitely affected. And the pineal gland is really important because what does the pineal gland make? If anybody knows, maybe put it in the comments. But it's melatonin. It makes melatonin, okay? And I think sleep dysfunction is like on the top of the complaints that I get from clients and from friends and family. Like everybody has sleep issues. Maybe it's something to do with the environmental exposure to fluoride, chlorine, bromine. You know? There was a great scientist named Dr. Klinghardt. He is loads of research, and if you want to look into his stuff, go for it. He's got loads of research, medical doctor, trained in Germany, went and learned Ayurvedic medicine and all those things. And one of his big topics of research is the effect of fluoride and the effect it has on the pineal gland. So the pineal gland is absolutely an issue, and all of those are all brain organs. Oh, the pineal gland is parathyroid sits beside your thyroid, and that regulates calcium and vitamin D and those type of things. And that's an important segue into the next step. There was actually in the study they talked about the GI, kidney, and immune effects. GI, and they actually clump liver into that GI system. But one of the things that they found was that there is a potential link between high levels of fluoride exposure and kidney stones. So, obviously the kidney is affected. There were studies that showed elevations in kidney function tests and liver function tests. So there's some injury that occurs from lots of fluoride exposure. What is lots of fluoride exposure? I think that's the question. Isn't really quantitative so much as subjective, because you have the dose levels that we know are bad for a lot of people, but then not everybody's the same. So there is that to consider. So they did find low grade kidney damage, liver damage, immune system suppression. I did a study of this a while back, and it was shocking to me. All of the areas of the immune system were suppressed. Now, fluoride tends to suppress bone marrow protection of white blood cells. It tends to hide out in fatty areas like your bone marrow, so it's certainly linked to that immune suppression of those white blood cells. But what's interesting, it actually also affects the way your white blood cells move in the body. It affects them directly on a cellular level. So not just their production from the bone marrow, but actually their movement on their own to get to where the bugs and the bad stuff is, right? To do your immune defense. So the other thing that was interesting about it, and is linked a little bit to that immune suppression, is the link to cancer. And there were some specific cancers linked with fluoridosis, and that would be your bone cancer, joint cancer, kidney cancer, bladder cancer, oral cancer, and uterine cancer. So the problem is really twofold. Okay, you don't know first of all, in the water, you don't know how much fluoride you're actually being exposed to regularly. Okay, if you're drinking water, I've never heard of any other place where you can legally put a chemical in the water system and say it's 4 milligrams, but you have no control of the variables of how the water is flowing to different households. You don't know the baseline health of the households, and you're just going to carte blanche put a chemical in the water and just go, it's good for people. Well, I can't necessarily take, a certain drug. Maybe I'm allergic to penicillin. I can't necessarily have penicillin. So why do you think it's okay to give me maybe you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody has a little bit of a unique response to things. So why would we think that we can just give everybody a chemical? It doesn't make any sense. So you don't really know what level you're being exposed to. It's not like they're over here publishing every day, like in Colorado, in this county, we're giving you this much fluoride. You got to do some digging to find that. But the thing is, it's not just in your water. So if fluoride was just in the water, that would be one thing, but it is not. It is contained in almost every single medication, which is kind of shocking to me. I regularly look at the inserts on drugs. I look at the inactive ingredients, especially. I developed a habit of doing that because of my experience looking at the package inserts when I was looking at my child's ADHD medication. I was shocked to find, that we had in there like dyes, and dyes are known to cause, hyperactivity in kids. So I just kind of got used to looking at package inserts. Most of the time you can find those if you Google it. Like, say you have go look at the prescriptions you're on and Google package insert for that prescription, and particularly search for the inactive ingredients, because that's where you'll find some of the things that you're like, what's that doing in there? And one of the things that shocked me is when I was looking up albuterol. Albuterol contains fluoride. So here you're puffing in your albuterol to help open your lungs, but you're also puffing in some fluoride. How much fluoride? Plus how much fluoride in my water? Plus maybe I'm also on prednisone. Does it have fluoride in it too? Yes, it does, by the way. So you got fluoride coming to you in all kinds of ways. Fluoride's also in PFOAs. They're getting a lot of press recently. They're in the headlines a little bit. They're called those forever chemicals. That's what I was talking about, was talked about in that movie, The Dark Waters. I highly recommend it. But those forever chemicals are found in your cookware, in your clothing, in your makeup. They're in everything. So you're getting exposed to fluoride there, everywhere. It's a major component in anesthesia. Fluoride is what we use in anesthesia. So your exposure levels can vary significantly and uptick significantly depending on your personal exposure. And that's a big deal. And then second point, and I said this in the mold thing, and it's true here too, is if your organs of elimination don't work well, and you don't clear chemicals well, maybe you don't clear anything well, maybe your detox pathways are terrible, well, that's going to affect you differently. Fluoride will affect you differently than it will somebody who has that hard, ruddy stock that can take on anything. They can smoke till they're 90 and they don't die, and they don't have any cancer, right? They have different detox pathways than you do. Or whoever has, elimination issues. So those are things to consider. That's a big problem. So what do we do with all of this? That's the question, right? How do we protect ourselves from the damaging effects of fluoride? So I want you guys to tune in. Don't hate me for leaving y'all hanging here, but this is a long episode and I don't want it to be too overwhelming. Tune in next time. All right. I will dig into some of those key tools that you need to use to recover from fluoride exposure. For now, I just want you to have it on your radar that it's a potential cause of some of your health issues. Do you struggle with any of those issues? Do you have dental fluorosis? Do you have joint problems? Do you have osteoporosis? Have you ever had a cancer? Do you have constant low-grade immune suppression? Do you have ADHD? Do you have depression? Are you brain foggy? Is your thyroid a disaster? Do you sleep terribly? Those are all things to think about. Maybe fluoride's causing some of that. Okay, something to consider. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I will see you next time. For the next 6 months, as we try to get the word out there about this podcast content, we are offering a very special promotion. We will be doing a drawing to give away a free MRT food sensitivity test, which samples the top 88 common food sensitivities. This test has a value of $399, and we will be giving it away for free. MRT is the most advanced and reliable test for hidden inflammatory reactions to foods and food chemicals, and it identifies your best foods. So this is not an allergen test, this is a food sensitivity test. This helps you when you identify your best foods and all those hidden inflammatory reaction. It helps you make a strategic food plan in order to rapidly reduce systemic and digestive inflammation, which improves outcomes of any other digestive health program that you're currently participating in. This is something I do for a lot of my clients in order to rapidly get ahead of the inflammation that they're dealing with. For more information about the test, please go to our website, brainhealth.com and check out the direct-to-you labs. We'll also provide a link for you in the show notes, so you can check that out as well if that's an easier direction for you. But as I said above, I am excited to offer this test, this $399 test to you for free. Here's how you qualify to get it for free, okay? So I'm going to warn you, since this test is almost $400, there are a few steps you must you must follow to qualify for this drawing. Okay, it's a $400 test, so it's not just one step, you guys. So here we go. Go to your show notes on whatever podcaster you're listening on, whether it's Google, Apple, or Spotify. Give us a rating, good or bad. I appreciate both. And comment on the podcast. I really appreciate the honest feedback, especially as I'm growing and learning this whole podcasting education process. I want you guys to really enjoy our time together, so let me know how I'm doing. All right, step number two, you will also follow us on Instagram or Facebook, please, and give us a comment there as well. Those links should also be found on every single episode of our show notes. So you just need to open the show notes that you're listening on right now and, click the link to your Instagram or Facebook, whichever you guys prefer, social media platform that you prefer to be on, and follow us there and give us a comment. And lastly, to qualify for the drawing, please share this podcast with at least one person. Okay, so to sum up, you're giving us a rating on your favorite podcaster, whichever one you prefer. You're going to follow us on the podcast and on Instagram or Facebook, whichever you're on, and give us a comment on both. And lastly, you're going to share this content with at least one person. That's a few steps, but it shouldn't take you more than 60 seconds to complete all three. We will be doing the drawing on December 15th, 2023. So let's get the word out there. My hope is that this podcast has left you with a few new insights, hopefully some encouragement, and most importantly, some actionable steps forward toward healing your body and your brain. If you found this content helpful, please don't forget to give us a like and share it with someone else who might benefit from it. Also, don't forget to follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages. I love hearing from you guys. I look forward to spending some time with you again soon. So until then, celebrate the small victories. There really is hope for lasting healing.